That is who he is.
You guys are right that this is not a new Donald Trump, but the situation that we're in is new. It is unique. We've never had a war going on while gas prices are spiking, while inflation is spiking, and while the debt is just ballooning. DOGE at the beginning of Trump's term was purported to cut costs, right? Cost overruns were supposed to be cut. Not only did they miserably fail at that, but now the deficit is up. And now he's pursuing a $1 billion ballroom. He's pursuing a $1.2 trillion golden... The ballroom?
Yes. The ballroom is privately funded.
Well, they're now asking for the Secret Service.
You're talking about security, and it's 20%.
Okay, let's talk
we can talk about the security.
While Americans continue struggling with inflation, rising gas prices, growing national debt, and uncertainty overseas, a heated political clash has erupted over President Trump's priorities and public behavior. Political commentator Adam Mockler argued that instead of focusing fully on the economic pressure facing everyday families, Trump appears more concerned with social media posts and defending a costly renovation project that has sparked criticism online. But conservative commentator Rantz fired back immediately, saying this is exactly who Trump has always been. According to Jason, voters already knew Trump's personality, style, and approach before electing him again. And they chose him anyway because they believed his leadership delivered results. The debate quickly turned into something much bigger than one renovation project or a few online posts. It became a larger argument about accountability, presidential standards, and whether Americans should simply normalize controversial behavior, because that's just Trump. Watch closely, because this conversation exposed a major divide in how people view leadership in America.
Tonight, erratic and unhinged. That's what critics are calling Donald Trump's behavior over the last 24 hours. From a social media repost accusing Barack Obama of treason to his outburst against reporters. Over the course of an hour and 15 minutes overnight, Trump posted more than 50 times, parroting debunked claims and firing off personal attacks, prompting critics to question his mental state. But today, as the president departed for one of his most consequential foreign trips in recent memory, a reporter's basic question about the ballooning cost of his ballroom seems to have set him off.
We have a ballroom that's under budget. It's going up right here. I've doubled the size of it because we obviously need that. And we're right now on budget, under budget, and ahead of schedule. I doubled the size of it, you dumb person. It's double the size. You are not a smart person.
Nothing gets him more worked up, it seems, than criticism of his ballroom, of all things. What's going on with the president? And why shouldn't Americans be concerned about a president that is retweeting unhinged things in the middle of the night, then waking up the next morning and screaming at reporters, calling women, in that case, a black woman, for the second time in a week, a dumb person?
I think we have to be honest here, whether you like him or hate him. This is not a new Donald Trump, right? We have seen this man speak the way that he speaks, post the way that he posts. I think he was famous for his tweets long before he ran for office, and yet 80 million Americans voted him right back in. So I think the question is, why did America think this is the president that we need, right? We can debate whether you like it or not. For some reason, the majority of the country thought this was the man for the moment. They like the way he speaks. They like the way he posts. They like what he puts out there.
Is it okay?
If majority of the country thinks so.
So if the majority of the country thinks that, like, the earth is flat, that's okay?
Well, that's why we have elections, right? We both know the earth's not flat, but I think...
And we both know that behavior is not okay.
Republicans for a long time were telling me, Joe Biden couldn't do the job. A majority of Americans elected him too. That didn't stop you from criticizing him for everything under the sun, and perhaps rightfully so. But I'm just wondering, why is there a different bar for this president?
Well, I don't see it as a different bar. I think people are criticizing it. You're criticizing it. It gets criticized by Republicans and Democrats all the time. I think the concession is that this is just not new. Right. The idea that people now are calling him unhinged with it. You've always called him unhinged with his tweets. Exactly. I mean, that is not a new story.
You're right.
And I think it is a fair criticism, right, that it's not presidential. I don't think it's particularly presidential, and I wish he wouldn't do it because I think it ends up causing him a lot more headache than he needs. But it's also a case of you can't change that. That is who he is.
You guys are right that this is not a new Donald Trump, but the situation that we're in is new. It is unique. We've never had a war going on while gas prices are spiking, while inflation is spiking, and while the debt is just ballooning. I mean, DOGE at the beginning of Trump's term was purported to cut costs, right? Cost overruns were supposed to be cut. Not only did they miserably fail at that, but now the deficit is up. And now he's pursuing a $1 billion ballroom. He's pursuing a $1.2 trillion golden. The ballroom?
Yes. The ballroom is privately funded.
Well, they're now
You're
asking
talking
for
about
the Secret
security.
Service.
You're talking about security, and it's 20%.
Okay, let's talk
We can
about
talk
that.
about the security
Let's
piece,
talk
yeah.
about that because I think this is also a big topic on Capitol Hill today. Lots of Republicans skeptical. There is a $1 billion price tag that was labeled as being for the president's ballroom project. And when you look at the details, it's really $220 million for the White House complex, which includes some things that seem to be related to the ballroom and perhaps things that are not. And then the rest of it seems to be hundreds of millions of dollars to the tune of nearly $800 million for things that seem to be part of the normal job, frankly, of the Secret Service, of DHS. And look at those numbers and just remember that the Department of Homeland Security received a budget last year that was 2 times its normal budget. It was $190-something billion that they just received in funding. And now they're trying to justify $1 billion for all of these things.
Yeah, well, I think we may have lost our ability to see outrage here because there's so much every single day that is coming out of this White House that is outrageous, that is, potentially corrupt. I mean, it's interesting about the private donors. I'm actually not so keen on the private donors. Horse trading, that we know has gone on. But I think people, and this is very worrisome, I think something we've all touched on, people's pain, which is economic right now, big time, coupled with the turning away from reliable news sources and the fragmentation of news and the ownership of the control of information by a handful of very powerful people, some of which I'm sure have donated to the ballroom. Mm-hmm. That's all part of a very worrisome turn towards oligopoly in this country.
And I think
it's such an important point. And I just want to note, like the way you're pointing out, the connection between this ballroom and the economic pain that people are feeling. You're not the only person who made note of that. Jim Justice, let me just read this quote. He says, "I can't get my hands around the fact that a lot of people are really hurting and they see $1 billion. And $1 billion is an awful, awful, awful lot of money." Mm-hmm. When you see that B in front of a number, it's like, what?
What? Yeah. It's almost too hard to conceptualize for most people. $1 million is almost too hard to conceptualize for some people. Quite honestly, $100,000 in most Americans' lives right now feels so far out of reach. This is, just to continue on your point, this is part of the strategy, though. I actually I think Donald Trump is a bit unhinged at times. And I also think he's pretty strategic. I think we're talking about him. We're flooding the zone. And so we could either talk about these tweets or him calling a reporter unjustifiably and disrespectfully dumb and stupid, or we could keep our eye on the ball and that we're in a war that we have no plans to get out, that Americans are suffering, and there's a B in front of this thing called a ballroom, not just the ballroom. The B is for billions. And so 80 million Americans did vote for him, but I'm not exactly sure if they voted exactly for this. And I just implore the American people not to be distracted. Yeah. Democrats or Republicans, not to be distracted, because we deserve better than what we are getting right now from our elected officials, particularly the president.
A triumphal arch, even the renovation of the reflecting pool, which, the reflecting pool always needs to be renovated. It seems All of these are things that seem to be distractions.
They are.
Yeah.
Young people get a lot of flack for having a lack of focus or being easily distractible, but I see the President of the United States as a more distractible person than any young person right now. Again, he's pursuing this ballroom, he's pursuing the reflecting pool, but he also wants a 60% increase in the military budget to refund and repay for the missiles that we used against Iran to get nothing in the first place. So it is economic calamity, and Donald Trump is focused on side projects. Very, very unfocused.
This debate perfectly captures the political divide happening across America right now. On one side, Adam Mockler's argument reflects the frustration of many Americans who feel the country is facing too many serious problems for distractions, online feuds, or luxury projects to dominate headlines. For critics, the concern is not just about one renovation or one social media post, it's about priorities. They believe a president should project stability, discipline, and focus during moments of economic pressure and global uncertainty. At the same time, Jason's defense highlights why Trump continues to maintain such a loyal political base. Supporters argue that Trump has never pretended to be a traditional politician. His blunt style, controversial statements, and constant online presence are seen by many of his voters as authenticity rather than a flaw. To them, critics are simply repeating the same complaints they've made for years while ignoring the policies and results they believe matter more. What makes this debate so important is that it raises a bigger question about modern politics itself. Have Americans lowered expectations for presidential behavior because politics has become more entertaining? Or are voters simply prioritizing economic outcomes and political strength over personality and image? For some people, Trump's unconventional style is exhausting and damaging during already tense times. For others, it's proof that he refuses to act like a scripted career politician. That divide is exactly why debates like this continue dominating political conversations, online and on television every single day, no matter which side people agree with. One thing is clear. Americans are no longer just debating policies, they're debating what kind of leadership they actually want from the presidency itself.